Today I want to teach you something about what I think is one of the most powerful tools we have at our disposal as marketers. And in my experience, which includes being the head of marketing and other things at 7 successful startups, 6 of those were acquired, which resulted in me working at 5 big global companies. And as mentioned earlier, I launched 16 products into market. In my experience, mastery of this concept can mean the difference between success and failure of the particular offering we're trying to market, also success and failure of potentially the company, and often your own career. This is a talk about positioning, one of the most misunderstood concepts in marketing. In fact, it's so misunderstood. Whenever I do a talk about positioning, I have to start by telling people what positioning is not. It's not the same thing as messaging. It's not the same thing as a tagline. It's not, my personal pet peeve is when people talk about brand positioning. There is branding, there is positioning. Those two things are completely separate concepts. In fact, everything on this slide flows from positioning. You can do all of these things, but positioning has to come first. I like to think about it this way. If you think of everything we do in marketing and sales as the house, positioning is the foundation upon which the house is built. I like to define it this way. Positioning defines how our product is the best in the world at providing something that a well-defined set of customers cares a lot about. That's a mouthful. I'll do it again. Positioning defines how our product is the best in the world at providing something that a well-defined set of customers cares a lot about. Put another way, it answers really fundamental questions. What the heck is this thing, and why should I care? It's a little bit like context setting for products. And context is important because if we first encounter something brand new that we've never seen before, we often look for clues in the context to try to figure out what it is. This is an example of a product that I once encountered completely out of context on Amazon while I was surfing around. And when I saw this product, I was convinced that this thing was a shoe. Yeah, so I looked at this and I said, those people at Crocs, they've doubled down on that whole ugly shoe thing, and they've like opened it up at the front and stuck this thing at the back. I sent a picture of it to my friend. I was like, look at these hideous things. And then later I saw it in context, and it turned out that's not what it is at all. And it became obvious what it was and what it is good for. What it is a dog muzzle. What it's good for is completely humiliating your dog in public. Even just a little hint of context can actually change the way we perceive a product. So I might show you this thing with a dog, and then I'll show you this, and you might say, oh, I know what that is. That's a dog thing too. That's one of those cones that you put on your dog so your dog doesn't bite himself or whatever. And it turns out it's not. It's actually a cone for humans. Do you know what this is? This thing is, apparently you put it on when you're going to eat noodles, and it stops the noodle splashes from getting on your... You know what? I have no idea what this thing is, but the marketers here, they gave us a hint what it's good for. You know what the hint is? The hint's that guy back there. You know what this thing is for? This is for making people fall in love with you. No, I don't think it works. We lie sometimes as marketers. The point of this, it's true. The point of this is that a shift in positioning can completely transform the way we perceive a product. So how do customers actually figure this out? If you look at the research, it's really interesting. The research shows that customers use what they know to make sense of what they don't. So they use what they already understand to make sense of new things that they come across that they don't yet understand. And that's really important because the markets that we operate in are extremely crowded. You're marketers, so you've probably seen this before. This is Scott Brinkler's marketing technology landscape. I use this to kind of drive home the idea of how bad it is our markets are so crowded. And you can see that market categories are one thing that we use to try to make sense of this mess. If you've never seen this before, the marketing technology landscape is one man's attempt to model the solutions of just one tiny corner of the software universe, just the solutions for sales and marketing problems, and there's 7,000 companies on this chart. But you can see he's trying to help you make sense of this by splitting things into market categories. So you can see, well, you can't because the font on this is microscopic, but if you had it in front of you, he's trying to say, well, the red stuff is advertising and promotion, the orange stuff is content and experience. So let's say I'm a marketer and I want to solve one of these problems, and I say, I'm thinking about putting live chat on my website, and I'd say, that kind of sounds like social and relationships, which is the yellow stuff. And sure enough, there's a box in there, a market category called bots and live chat. So that's great. Now I'm not looking at 7,000 products anymore. I've narrowed it down to, it's still not great, but I've narrowed it down a bit. But reducing the number of potential competitors is not the only thing that positioning a product in a market category does. What it does is it actually sets off a really powerful set of assumptions in the minds of customers about what this product is all about. It works a bit like this. Do you guys ever see that show? It's called Shark Tank. Where people come and they pitch their products like a pitch contest. Well, let's do this, except it's a pitch contest, but all I'm going to give you is the market category, and let's see what you know about me. So let's try. So, okay, I'm on the pitch contest. Oh my God, I'm on TV. Okay, hi everyone. I'm here to pitch you my amazing new product. It's a spectacular, new, revolutionary, never been seen before advanced CRM. That's it, that's all you get. Okay, now who's my competitor? Salesforce, right. Name me 2 features that you would expect my product to have. Tracking accounts, tracking a deal, pipeline, yeah. What's the title of the person that I sell this CRM to? VP Sales, Head of Sales, yeah. Here's a good one. What's my price? I didn't tell you anything. I didn't tell you a darn thing. I just said I was a CRM. How would you know what my price is? Well, can't be more than Salesforce. They're the leader in that market. So I told you nothing but the market category, but you made a whole bunch of assumptions about my product that I didn't tell you anything else except the category. So here's the way this works. If I do a good job of selecting a market category and the assumptions that it triggers about my product are true, fantastic. I just saved myself a lot of work. I don't have to tell you who my competitor is. It's assumed. I don't have to list every single feature. Half of that stuff is table stakes. Unfortunately, it works the same if I do a terrible job of it. So if I position my product in a market category and it triggers a bunch of assumptions about my product that are not true, my sales and marketing team now have to do significant work to undo the damage that the positioning has already done. So I'll give you an example. I get a call from Silicon Valley, and there's this team, and they're a startup, and I know their investor, and the investor said they have fantastically happy customers, but their problem is when they first try to pitch this thing to people, nobody can figure it out, so it takes them forever to close any business. Maybe you could help them. So I get them on the phone, and I said, hey, what's your story? And they said, well, we're lawyers, ex-lawyers, and we came up with this idea for a thing. It's email for lawyers. And my first thought was, who knew that lawyers needed their own weird, funky email? But okay, what do I know? I'm not a lawyer, thank God. And so they're like, okay, so show me this. So they jump into the demo, and they're going through the demo, and they're showing me this thing, and it's cool. It's got like an inbox, and there's conversations going on in there. And I said, well, this is really cool, your email for lawyers. So how does the calendar work on this thing? And the CEO says, calendar? Oh, no, we don't have one of those. I'm like, what? But you compete with Gmail and Outlook. How do I replace Gmail and Outlook if you don't have a calendar? And he says, oh, we can't replace Gmail and Outlook. We don't have a calendar. I'm like, no wonder people are confused. So, okay, but wait, but customers love you. So why do they love you so much? And he said, well, we've got this thing. It's super cool. We have a patent on it. And we call it super secure context-aware file sharing. So what it does is the lawyers are collaborating with their clients. It automatically figures out who should have access to a document, puts it in a super secure place, and shares it with only the people that should have access to it. That's actually pretty cool. It's also not email. If I wanted to solve that problem, would I buy email to solve that problem? No, I wouldn't. So what these folks have is actually a really cool, amazing, innovative product masquerading as kind of crappy email. So let's take the same product and put it in a market category and see if it's different. So let's just pick it up and we'll put it somewhere else. Let's put it in team collaboration. So if I say what we've got here is team collaboration for lawyers, now who's my competitor? Well, it's Slack-ish, but they don't do anything in particular for lawyers. I would expect some very specific feature for lawyers to do collaboration. Oh, that's exactly what we've got. Super secure, context-aware, file sharing, ding-dong thing. All of a sudden, their thing makes perfect sense. Who's it for? It's for the lawyers. Of course it is. You told me that explicitly. The greatest conversation we had was about the pricing. So one of the bad problems with being in the email market space is that everybody expects email to be free. So they always had a terrible time trying to charge for this thing. Team collaboration is a lot better because people are used to paying money for that. So they could put the price up and nobody cared. We had the conversation we had was I said, look, you know, you've got this special thing just for lawyers. You could maybe say, look, this is really special for lawyers and charge more than Slack. In fact, you could get the lawyers on the phone, and what you do is when they ask about the pricing, you say, hey, look, you know, we built this especially for lawyers, so we have this really special pricing structure. We're just going to charge by the minute. And then just let that dangle. And then they're going to say, but that's not fair. And you're going to say, I know. They didn't do that, but I think that's a missed opportunity, to tell you the truth. So it also illustrates the problem that I see the most often in positioning is that we rarely choose our market category deliberately. Much like the email for lawyers guys, they set out to build email because in their minds that's what it was at the beginning. But then eventually, as they added and removed features and the product became more mature, it became clear that email wasn't really the right category for it. But they had never really thought about shifting categories because they weren't deliberate about what category it was in the first place. I'll give you another example of this. Early in my career, I got hired as the vice president marketing for a company that sold a database. It was founded by two guys with PhDs in database science. And the whole deal with this database is if you had like mountains of data, like terabytes of data, they built it for a bank that had a huge amount of data that you would ask a question of this data and do a query on it. And it was so complicated and there was so much data, it would take 12 hours to answer the question. So they had to run the query over the weekend. And with this fancy magical database, you could do it in 3 minutes. Magic. So they had sold a bit, but it wasn't exactly flying off the shelf. So they hired me, and that was my job to fix that. So I came in and started a bunch of campaigns. We were running ads, we were doing content, we were doing webinars. We did a lot of events because our folks went to events. And after a couple of months, it became clear that none of that was working. Like literally none of it was working. Nobody opened my emails. I had webinars and no one would show up. The worst was the events. We would go to events and we'd have our booth and people would come into the booth and say, hey, what you guys got here? And we'd say, oh, we got this amazing new database. And the people would go, huh, that's it. Microsoft's got t-shirts, you know, and they would just walk off. Nobody wanted this thing. So I was confused by this, and after a while I said, I better go out on some sales calls with my sales rep and see what happens when my sales rep pitches this thing, because something's happening here. So I went to my sales rep, he set up a week's worth of meetings, and I followed along on the meetings, and every single meeting went the same way. So he would walk into the meeting, plug in, the customer would show up, and I'm selling the chief information officer and a bunch of database people, and they would all come in, and my sales rep would show up and say, hello, thank you all for coming here. Today I'm going to talk to you about this revolutionary, new, amazing, exciting database. And the minute he said that, everybody in the room would do this action that means I don't want to hear anything else you have to say. You know what the action's like this. Look, cats. Everybody in the room, and we've lost them. And so then he would start tap dancing and say, no, 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 you don't understand. It's a special database, special database. And he would go on for a couple more slides. We had a 65-slide sales deck. We would get to about slide 4 or 5. Then the senior person in the room would put up her hand, and she'd be like, yeah, that's awesome, that database thing you got there. That's amazing. But I'll tell you something. You know what we don't need around here? A database. We got one. It's called Oracle. We got Oracle. It's all over the place. Everybody in this room is certified on Oracle. We all do Oracle. And And, we're not married to it. It's not perfect, but, we're not getting a new one. And what we'd really like you guys to do is to just, get the heck out. And they just kick us out. Slide 5. And then we'd go back. So we did 4 or 5 of these in a row. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding. So I'm in the car with the sales rep after the 4th one. And I'm like, dude, does this happen every time we do a sales pitch for this? And he's like, yeah, pretty much, yeah. And I'm like, why are we even going to these? We should be out looking for jobs. And in this case, we got lucky. And how we got lucky was the very last pitch we did was the classic sympathy sales call. You know what the sympathy sales call is? That's when the CEO knows a guy who knows a guy that gives you an hour because they feel sorry for you. We had one of those. So we walk in and the CIO comes in and he's alone because he doesn't want to waste his team's time with this dumb sales call. And so we come in and my sales rep goes in and he pitches the whole thing and the customers sits there super polite, doesn't interrupt him or anything. He's Canadian. Super polite. We go through the whole thing and we get to the very end and we're like, so what'd you think? And the customer says, I love it. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's like magic. I've never seen anything like it. It's fantastic. How can we get it in here? It's amazing. And we're like, yeah, somebody likes our stuff. And then he said, you know what? Like about halfway through the pitch there, I got to be honest, I didn't have any clue what you guys were. But then at some point the light came on and I realized, gosh, these guys aren't building a database at all. And we're like, hey, yeah, he loves us. What? And I had only been to the company like 2 months. And I was like, that's impossible. Well, like, what do you mean we're not a database? He says, no, you're not. What you guys are is like a business intelligence tool. And I decided I was going to have an argument with him about that. I'm like, we can't be a business intelligence tool. We don't even have reports. Like, we're database people making a database. He's like, yeah. Databases do all kinds of things. You guys do this one analytics thing really, really well. And that's what makes you a business intelligence tool. And my gosh, you're the VP marketing. You don't even know what you do. That's a real Canadian thing, by the way. Like, just I can say that because I'm Canadian. Like, they seem like they're so nice. Like, they're all like Justin Bieber, Celine Dion. And then, like, when you least expect it, they get you with something terrible. Like Nickelback. It's true. Anyway, so we went back to the office, and we had this conversation. Maybe we're not a database. And I'm telling you, it was a fight in the office. Everybody said, we're database people. We make databases. We said, well, let's just change the pitch. We'll change the messaging. We're a business intelligence tool. Maybe what we are is a data warehouse for machine-generated data. Anyways, we changed the pitch. We went back in, and all the sales pitches were different. So we'd walk in and say, oh, we're a data warehouse for machine-generated data. And all the same people that were like, cat videos were like, that's so cool. We don't have one of those. Keep talking. What is that thing? We don't keep talking. And so, 1, we started to make some money. 2, we actually got to go through our entire sales pitch without getting thrown out. And 3, it opened my eyes to this idea that just because it seems obvious that you're in one market, sometimes you're actually better positioned in a different market. Now, early in my career, I had this issue in that I kind of thought positioning wasn't my job. And some of you in here might say, look, that's not my job. I'm not in charge of that. I don't get to say what we are. That sounds like a shift in business strategy. The CEO tells us that. The head of product decides who our target market is and what we are. And so early in my career, I had this idea that, my job was to be excellent at marketing execution. So I was going to be the best at email marketing. I was going to be amazing at SEO. I was going to be fantastic at, doing a webinar, getting an event done or whatever. And my job was to take whatever positioning they gave me and spin that straw into gold. To have this very technical representation of how I thought this worked. Like, you could basically give me anything, and my job was to apply my genius marketing genius, and the unicorns were going to come out the back. And then, but then after a few years of doing that, I realized that if nobody wants email for lawyers, if nobody wants a database, it doesn't matter how genius my marketing is, my stuff's going to stink. and the results are going to show it. And so, you know, I thought it was looking like this, but in fact, it's actually this. Like, you know, the poo comes in, I'm working really hard, and then what I get at the end is just a sparkly, shiny, but it's still poo. And I didn't sign up for that. Like, you know, I didn't sign up for that. I was like, I want a promotion. I want to get paid more. I want to get invited to the board meeting. And let me tell you, like, if the positioning's lousy, you can't do anything good until you fix the positioning, because Polly Poo Polisher does not get invited to the board meeting. So whether you want to or not, whether your boss wants you to or not, whether your client wants it or not, you're going to have to tackle this positioning thing. So how do you do it? I'll tell you, this is a question that vexed me for a lot of years. So I actually have a degree in systems design engineering and kind of ended up in marketing at a startup, and then we got acquired. My boss quit, and I was like last person standing and inherited the whole team. And so I embarked on my 10-year journey of trying to learn marketing. So I took a lot of classes, I read a lot of books, and I learned a lot of things. One of the things I learned was this positioning thing is super important. But what I couldn't figure out is how to actually do it. So the closest I ever got was I was taking this course. And one of the modules in the course was positioning. And I thought, oh, good, I'm going to learn how to do this finally. And the professor got out and he put this thing up, which is the positioning statement. And so I had just gotten done repositioning a product. It was another database, but we thought it was like a personal use SQL database, and we repositioned it as an embeddable database for mobile devices. Pretty different markets. So this guy puts this thing up, and he says, this is how you do it. It's like Mad Libs. We just, our product is a blank for blankety blank, 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 and I fill in things like my market category and who my competitors are and the value, and voila, beautiful positioning. And then the guy just goes on to the next topic. And I'm like, whoa, 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 my dude. Wait, that can't be how we do it. Like, there's a blank there that says market category. Like, how do I know what's the best market category? How do I actually do that? So I put my hand up like, hey, and how do we do that? And I explained the whole thing. I just repositioned. And he did this thing. He's this older guy, and he had these glasses, and he was at the front, and he did this thing where he put his glasses down, and he did this, like, looking at me over his glasses thing, and he says, and I said, so how do you know which market category is right? And he says, trust me, April, you'll just know. I was like, what? I have a degree in engineering, man. Like, we don't just know anything. I didn't just know calculus. I had to learn that. I didn't just know mechanics of deformable solids. I had to learn that. I had to learn how to do segmentation. Just learned it last week, in fact. I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to learn this too. So then I decided no one knows how to do this. So I went around to all the smart marketers I know, and I'm like, what's your methodology for positioning? And they're like, kind of trial and error. We figure some stuff out, whatever. I'm like, that's crazy. We can fix this. So I had this idea. You know what you should do is you're going to take positioning and break it down into component pieces. And the component pieces are essentially, if you look at it, they're essentially the blanks of the positioning statement. There's 5 of them. It's market category, competitive alternatives, unique attributes or features of your product, the value your product can deliver for customers, and what customers you're trying to sell it to, my target customer segments. Those are the 5 components. So I figured all I got to do is figure out how to do the right thing for each of the 5 components, put it together, voila, positioning. Except then the reality sets in. So I'm trying to figure out how do I get the right answer for each of these things. Do you know what's really vexing about this? Each of the components has a relationship to the others. That's something they didn't teach you in marketing school. The positioning statement gives you no clue about that. Let's pick one. Value. The unique value that your offering can deliver for customers is completely dependent on your unique features. But your unique features are only unique when compared to a competitive alternative. So those 3 things are linked. My customer segments, who's my best customer, my best target customer? My best target customer are people that care a lot about my value. Those 2 things are inherently linked. And then what's my market category? My market category is essentially the context within which that value is obvious to these people. So where do I start? So for like 6 years, I thought there is no starting place. All these things are all mixed up together, and you just have to trial and error. That's how we do it. Until a handful of things happened. But one was that I realized that if I started anywhere other than competitive alternatives, what I got to was neat positioning. It sounded cool, but it didn't work because it wasn't differentiated. And eventually, where I got to was this. You actually have to do it in a certain order. And the order goes like this. You start with competitive alternatives. Now, I do a lot of work with startups and tech companies, and they get the first step wrong. And because the first step is wrong, everything downstream is wrong. So the first step is competitive alternatives, which is not the same thing as competitors. So generally when I talk to startups, I'll say, who are your competitors? And they'll say, oh, there's all these little companies. And they'll list a whole bunch, and they're all like 3-person companies working from a basement in Silicon Valley. And I'll say, okay, those are competitors. And then I say, well, what do you have that they don't have? And they'll say, oh, our big thing's ease of use. Like, if you use their solution, it takes 15 clicks to get this thing done. But if you use ours, it only takes 3. So we're way easier to use. That's our big differentiator. But then you go talk to their customers, and you say, hey, if these folks didn't exist, what would you use instead? What would you do? And half the time the customers will say stuff like, use a spreadsheet, maybe? Or maybe I'd just hire an intern. And so meanwhile, these folks are out there advertising and talking about, oh, you should use us because we're so easy to use. But are you ever going to win on ease of use versus the intern? Like, you know what's super easy to use? The intern. The intern is easy to use, right? If you're like, Joey, get me a coffee. Cream and sugar? While you're at it, fill out the spreadsheet. Come on back. Like, so if you're comparing yourself to the wrong comparable, then you've got the wrong unique attributes, then you've got the wrong value, then you've got the wrong target customers. So you actually have to start with competitive alternatives and work your way through. It's a bit more complicated than this, and I could spend probably 3 or 4 hours teaching you how to do this. But instead of doing that, because I've only got 10 minutes, what I did was I took super good notes for you, like 200 pages of them, and I put them in a book. And for like the price of a beer, you can get access to a thing that took me like 15 years to figure out. What a world. I'm going to give you one more story. So this is kind of an older one, but I like it a lot. And I think it illustrates where we broke down on that process. So I got hired to run marketing for a company in the enterprise CRM space, but this was a long time ago, and Salesforce was still selling just the bottom end of the market, just small, medium businesses. The leader at the time was a big, big company in the Valley called Siebel. And so Siebel was the undisputed leader of enterprise CRM, and we were also enterprise CRM. So unsurprisingly, every time we got a meeting with a customer, the first question we would get is the obvious question, which is, how are you better than Siebel? And the answer was, we just kind of weren't. They had $2 billion revenue. We had 1.2 million. They had 8,000 employees. We had, I think I was employee 23. They had 400 customers. We had 4. So, but we did have 2 things that we thought were really differentiating. So we knew exactly who our competitive comparable was. Question, Siebel. And we knew what our unique features were. We had 2 things that made us special. The first one was we had a feature that enabled you to model relationships in a different way. And it was cool. No one else, no CRM on the market could do it. And it looked good in a demo. We always showed it in demos. We could model a many-to-many relationship between people. It looked really jazzy in a demo. So every time we go in the demo, we'd show it to people. But the problem was we never really figured out how that translated to value. So we would go in the demo, we show the thing, and then, and then people in the room would say, wow, that looks really cool. So what do you actually use that for? And we'd say, anything you want. and then they'd say, huh, what else you got? And we'd say, well, what we really had was we were broke and afraid of going out of business. So if you asked us for a discount, we'd give you one. Yeah. I remember once we were doing a pitch to a big insurance company, and we showed them, we went through the whole pitch, and then at the end, we showed them this special feature, and he didn't care. And then he said, what else you got? And then we showed him the price, and he says, oh, I get what you are now. I didn't really get what you were before, but I get what you are now. You're a cheap, crappy Siebel. Ouch. We didn't get that deal. And so anyway, so needless to say, business is bad. We're not selling a lot with that value prop. And how we got into this one was kind of lucky too. We had a really hard time keeping salespeople on the payroll because they couldn't sell anything. So they would stay with us a couple months and then they quit. And so we were always hiring new salespeople. And my CEO was getting very frustrated with this, and he thought it was the salespeople's fault. So he was kind of a jerk in interviews. So in this particular day, this guy comes in for an interview, and my CEO is kind of harsh with him, and he leans over the desk and he goes, "You, buddy, give me one good reason why we should hire you to be a sales rep at this company." And this guy was from New York, so he had a bit of attitude, and he leaned over and he went, "I'll give you one good reason, because my buddy is the head of investment banking at Goldman Sachs, and I'm going to get you a meeting." And we were like, sounds good. So we hired him. And then he gets us the meeting with the head of investment banking at Goldman Sachs. We're all excited. I decided I was going to go to that meeting too, mainly because I just wanted to see what the office of the head of investment banking at Goldman Sachs looks like. And it's cool. It's like this room. Anyway, so we get in the meeting, he shows the whole demo, and like always, he shows his special feature. And when we get to this special feature, head of investment banking goes crazy. He's like, wait, what, stop, like, whoa, does that mean that if this person used to sit on a board with this person, you can model that? We're like, yeah. And he said, well, what if these two people used to work together, but they don't anymore? You can model that? We're like, yeah. He says, whoa, hold up, I need the vice presidents. And he runs down the hall. He comes back with 3 guys that work for him that are vice presidents, and he says, show them the thing, show them the thing. And so the vice presidents come in, and they're like, okay, and then we show them the thing, and the vice presidents, same thing. They're like, what? So 2 people belong to the same golf club. You can manage that. And we're like, yeah, we can model that in our software. And then they all turned to each other and started speaking their weird secret banker language and jumping up and down. And me and the sales rep were over in the corner like this. Like, have you ever been in a room full of super excited investment bankers? It's terrifying. Anyway, so we closed the business. We're all happy. Then we got this idea. Maybe bankers love our stuff. We should go pitch this to another bank. So we went to Morgan Stanley, and same thing happened. We go in, we show them the thing, the bankers jump up and down, we close the business. So things are going better. We're making some money. More importantly, it triggered a conversation back in the office. Maybe what we are is not enterprise CRM. Maybe we're just CRM for investment bankers. Now, that might not seem like a big change to you, but let me tell you, it was a big change at the office. Do you know who hated that idea? The board. The investors were like, no way, man, we invested in you to go kill Siebel, and now you're telling us you're not going to fight them at all. You're just going to retreat to this little corner of the market. Like, how many investment banks are there out there? You can never make any money doing this. And we had the idea that we'd make more because we would signal to the market we're for investment banks, and they would call us, and we wouldn't have to work so hard to get a deal. And how we convinced the board was 2 things. The first one, we said, look, the reality is we're not giving up anything, man. Nobody buys our stuff anyway. So it's not like the phone is ringing off the hook and we're going to say, sorry, not you, like this. No. And so that was the first thing, like, what would it hurt to try? What we're doing now stinks. And then the second thing was we said, look, we're not going to stay in investment banking forever. We're going to dominate investment banking. After that, we're going to go dominate retail banking. After that, we're going to go get insurance. After that, we're a great big company. And when we're a great big company, then we're going to go kill Siebel. And it's going to be amazing. We're all going to get rich. And they said, all right, give it a shot. And we did. And that switch in positioning was absolutely transformational to the business. So the first thing was we never got in a head-to-head competition with Siebel again. So what would happen is we go in, meet with the investment bankers, and we walk in, and we'd say, hey, we're CRM for investment banks. And the bankers would say, don't you compete with Siebel? And we'd be like, oh, Siebel. We love those guys. What an amazing company. They're so smart and so big. They make so much money. They probably have the world's most amazing general purpose CRM for like call centers in India and I don't know, retailers or something. Not you, Wolf of Wall Street. You need something special. Let me show you the thing. Let me show them the thing. Everybody jumps up and down. We close some business. We grew so quickly. We had been limping along at a bit less than 2 million for about 5 years. We went from 2 million to a little under 80 million in 18 months. And then the end of the story is that Siebel got so sick of us kicking their tail all up and down Wall Street and everywhere else that they came and acquired us for $1.3 billion. Yeah, not bad for cheap, crappy Siebel. And the board didn't think we were going to make any money with that positioning stuff. That's it. I'm going to leave you with 3 things. First of all, you need to think about positioning deliberately. We tend to not do it deliberately. We tend to kind of fall into positioning. Once in a while, you got to take a step back and think, is this position the way we think it should be? Secondly, if you're going to position, you got to position around your differentiated strengths. You got to really understand what makes you different and better than the alternatives on the market. And then lastly, you got to follow a positioning process. This is not Mad Libs. We don't get to just make this stuff up. We actually have to go step by step, figure out the pieces, and do it properly. There's a bunch of different ways you can contact me, and that's it. Thanks so much.